Hey guys, everybody, thank you for joining. I've not been feeling well, so if something doesn't come up or not very clear, just let me know and I can repeat or explain more. But yeah, happy to be here. I'll walk you through a couple of very fundamental things around how to think about positioning, framing, and how that goes into road mapping. I mean, we are all experts here, of course, to find out how what product features we should add and so on and so forth. But then this will hopefully give you a structured way of thinking around how we think around products just in general. Uh, yeah, so a quick intro about myself. I've been in the industry for a little over 15 years. Done everything from coding to branding to product management, product marketing, and so on and so forth. So have an experience with startups, been part of startups that raised from seed to Series C, as well as scale ups with Fortune 500 companies. Yeah, so I'll be bringing and distilling all the things that I've learned in the past. Of course, 45 minutes is not something that we can learn everything, but I'll walk you through the high level and happy to take more questions, answer anything that you may have offline, or just feel free to ask during the presentation. So, all right. So with that, let's just get started. Primarily, we have all been there. When we pitch, we say that, okay, it's an awesome product, but then the audience first starts with, how are you different from company XYZ, right? That's the first question that we generally get asked. So here's one level where we come in when we are pitching. We say that, okay, we have an awesome product. We pitch, and then that's a question around, how are you different? So there's a massive disconnect between companies creating offerings. They are exceptional, world-changing, and then the customers, in this case, the VCs or whoever we are trying to pitch, could probably see, how are you different? They fail to see what's interesting about you. Before I dive into, how we get around that problem, one thing that's key to know is a framing can help grow or even kill. And to highlight this concept, I'll bring up an experiment that Washington Post did in about 2007 around context, perception, priorities, and so on and so forth, right? So here's a world-renowned musician, Joshua Bell. He was possibly the best violinist at that time, around 2007. His concerts were getting sold at $100 a ticket, right? And one of the experiments was, can we take Joshua Bell and have him play in a subway in Washington, right? So as you can see in this concept where people pay $100, it's all the experience is top notch. There's a cameraman, everybody is suited up, excellent ambience. There's a brochure that says his accomplishment and so on and so forth. And the people who are visiting are in a mood. They want to hear good music, right? With how he is renowned. So there he goes. They take him and make him play during the morning hour in subway. And you can see where he's standing, how he's dressed up, and so on and so forth. And guess what? Out of a little over 1,000 people who passed by in a span of a couple of hours, only 7 paused. And there's a donation box, and then he only made about $32. So when you first look at that, you may see that, okay, maybe that's not the right place because people are in a rush. But then what was interesting to note is there was a lottery ticket stall, and there were people standing in line for that lottery ticket stall. There was a shoe shining, stand. There was an owner. There were people who were getting their shoe polished. They did not notice anything either. So basically, in short, it wasn't the time. So the busy schedule isn't to blame. He was undermined by his context, right? So you can say I'm wearing a baseball cap, like a sweatshirt, plaza, next to a garbage can. What this highlights is everything about his context communicates he's a street performer in this case. And there's nothing here you should pay particular attention to. He's just playing some music, the same kind of music that gets played in the fancy opera houses, for instance. Right. So framing and context is highly, highly important. How you see, where you say it. So bottom line is context trumps product. The same product, the same person playing, it's exceptional, world class. But even a completely ass-kicking product can be completely defeated by a lousy context. Right? So that's the bottom line. Let's take a business example, something that we all know and love, right? So let's say you're a baker, and your specialty is cake, and you decide you're going to go make chocolate caramel cake, for instance. But before you even put the first few ingredients into the bowl, you've already made a couple of critical decisions because you're making a cake, right? So you're making a cake. So the target buyers and sales channels, you're going to look at selling folks who fancy dessert. It's either a high class restaurant or a bakery where you're going to be selling, and that's going to be your sales channels. You're going to be competing with other cakes, this high class, ice cream, pies, other desserts, so on and so forth. So that's your competitive landscape, if you will. Now, since you're competing for the same sort of ice cream cakes or ice creams and pies and so on and so forth, you won't be able to charge too much. It's the same as how you're going to be playing along with the competition itself, right? So that's always the case. And then you may see that in order to stand out, you will need to create, let us say, organic or gluten-free, add a French salt to your caramel sauce, and so on and so forth. So your thinking goes around how can you make it in such a way so that you make it appealing for a fancy cake, right? But the almost same baking process, if you were to decide to make a muffin instead, right? A chocolate caramel muffin, your context is different now. It's the same batter, same process, more than likely. So please, bakers in the house, please don't shoot me. But then it's primarily pretty much the same set of activities that you would do for creating a muffin. But then you're going to be selling at a different place. Your sales channels, your target buyers are going to be different. You're going to be looking at coffee shops. You're going to be looking at the diners, right? Not necessarily restaurants. You're going to be competing with donuts instead. So it's something that's fast, quick, grab and go. Yes, even here you cannot charge much more than a donut in this case, but then you may be selling a lot more in this particular market. Now, when you're thinking about key product features or so-called roadmap and so on and so forth, you don't have to worry about making it gluten-free or adding your French salt and so on and so forth, because the people you're going to target are people who eat chocolates for breakfast. They're not concerned about how healthy it is necessarily. They just want something to get filled up and get on with their lives, with the day. So, you know, you by framing it differently, pretty much the same process, now you're able to channel and make sure that you're competing in a different industry altogether, and your economics are going to be entirely different. So whether to make a muffin or a cake, or how about something else like a cupcake? So all of these are important, and it'll fundamentally be changing the business, right? So primarily, bottom line here is, while the product is the same, you have to think through how you position it, and that will lead to how your roadmap is going to be, including everything around the marketing and so on and so forth. Right? Any questions so far? Any thoughts, comments? Right, I'll take that as a no. So how do we go about framing? It's critical where you are in the product life cycle, in the life cycle of the industry in itself, the maturity of the industry, and that's how you can go around framing your solution, right? So, for instance, if you are playing in a market where there is an existing market leader, right? So one frame of reference is using a existing frame and dominating the category. So you're a category leader in this case. If you aren't the leader, you have to frame it in a way so that you can beat the leader in their own game. For example, if it's a if the market leader is all about speed, you'll have to convince everybody that you're faster. If the leader's dominating category is around safety or security, you'll have to make sure that people perceive your benchmarks and so on and so forth for higher safety standards or higher security regulations, and so on and so forth. So in this case, you will have to ensure that you are able to beat the industry leader in this case. By definition, as you can see, there's a market leader. For startups, it's a little bit difficult, unless, of course, there is a clear gap, right? Unless there's a weakness that you can exploit. Or it could be that in the industry maturity, it's not something that the market leader has established a dominating position, and it's something that you can take on in this case. The the other way to frame is to look at a niche category, right? So you can still use the existing framing and make a case for why you are the best in that submarket. It relates a little bit towards the style one, which is like, okay, the speed is the best, or the security is the best, and so on and so forth. Or it could be a set of different kind of customers, right? So let's say you're building a database, and you necessarily are not the best in terms of all the other vectors of database assessment, but then you're best at retrieving, for instance, right? So you could then say that you are best at business intelligence related applications, where they can then come in and start using your database where you have a large amount of data, but then the speed of retrieval is the highest. And so you're now not competing with every database company out there, but a niche who is kind of operating on the speed. So obviously, this the benefit of the style is that you can frame your product around how the customers evaluate, right? So they already understand how to evaluate, and then you have a way to kind of establish your leadership, market leadership in that place. You don't have to take on the market leader in each and every aspect of it, but then only a certain aspect of it. And obviously, with this style of framing, the market is smaller, and it's a smaller frame of reference in this case. Your goals have to be in that way, and then you'll have to think about strategies that go around land and expand, right? Instead of directly going head on with the market leader. Next up is, if you have a very disruptive technology, innovation breakthrough, something that you can easily use to dethrone a leader in this case, right? So it's pretty much the same thing in terms of evaluating criteria that your customers use. They understand, but then you just do things in such a faster, better way that let's say the cost is something that's 1/10, or it's a breakthrough where you can achieve the same outcome, but in a 1/10 the cost, 10x the speed, whatever the criteria is. But then you clearly have a way to unseat, dethrone a leader. In this case, they just cannot compete because it's too big to change. So this is around, you would use strategies that disadvantages the current leaders, so the cost, for instance, and you will highlight the strengths. So maybe it's customizability. It's the ease of use of your product, such that it's flexible enough and it goes to the point where it can address thousands of use cases, and so you don't have to spend as much time customizing, and that's why your costs are low, or your onboarding time is really fast, right? So all of these will get into play in this case, because you have a fundamentally new way of doing the same thing. It's a breakthrough. It's an innovation breakthrough, if you will. And last is, of course, you define a new category entirely. So it's a completely new solution. It's something that the world hasn't seen. You could be using it as a way by fitting in different parts of the puzzle, if you will, right? And you're coming up with an entirely new category, so something they have not done. Now, obviously, if this is not something that they have not done and lived through, you will have to convince that the world needs this solution. Your iPhone, iPads, that they come into this category, right? Where before this kind of device came in, nobody thought about these. However, if you see, the iPhone was made out of merging existing technologies, internet browsing, corporate, like when they disrupted BlackBerry, for instance. So by taking into account that there needs to be an easy way for corporate communications, you can browse, you can call, and so on and so forth, right? So they merge existing categories to come up with an entirely new category. And that was, the rest of it is history, of course. But in this case, it was such a wow factor that they didn't really have to convince too much. But not every product can be an iPhone. So you have to double down on your marketing efforts in terms of why the world needs to see this new solution that you're bringing into the world, for instance. You'll have to convince. Now, of course, this is obviously much more difficult, but the rewards are again also very high, as you can imagine. So these are the primary 4 different ways that you could use to frame. And going back to my example of database, where how you frame your product. So you could completely say that instead of coming up and saying that, hey, we have a brand new database, people will ask, how are you different than Oracle, for instance, right? Or pick any other database. But then if you go with a solution that says, we have a product that can give you the business insights in the matter of seconds while maybe you're on your phone with the customers, that's an entirely new, different market. It's the same database, but then you have optimized it for speed. You have optimized it. Now you're playing with people who are tools who can give business insights that can be used in settings where they need a kind of a real-time solution, right? But then you're not going to be compared with Oracle anymore. You're going to be compared with like how fast, what is the solution out there? And in this case, there may not be many. So by framing it as not as a database, but by framing it as a solution to get you business insights really, really fast, almost instantaneous, and with dashboards and so on and so forth, you have framed the same product in a market that now will perceive your product as something that's useful in terms of how important is it for me to answer a question in real time rather than the database vectors that I use for evaluation. Does that make sense? Any thoughts, questions, comments?
I think it was clear. No questions. Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So how do you go about framing up? And it's like, this is a high level set of things. When you're in the exercise of creating and framing your positioning, you just have to think about what you're trying to get to and not worry about what is the default market. In the case, that the default market is database. You're not looking at databases. You're looking at your ultimate solution. What was unique in the example was that you have a product that can retrieve data really, really fast, right? The speed was of essence. And that is the reason why it should be existing in the first place. If you didn't have something that was really unique, maybe you need to go back to your drawing boards. What's the value for them? What's the value for your customers for these unique products? It's like, okay, this is something now that you can have customers answer questions and get business insights in almost instantaneously. Maybe somebody is on the phone and they're asking for a question, and you just need to reply. I see Ronak, you have a question?
Oh, no. I raised my hand by mistake.
Okay, no worries.
It was a mistake. Go ahead.
No worries, no worries. All right, so primarily look at your uniqueness and try to frame it in a way that's centered around the value, right? Then comes in who really cares. In this case, when you're trying to frame it, it's a speed. So who would really care about speed? And that's how you would channel about maximizing your marketing and sales efforts and so on and so forth. So basically, who cares? And after all of these, let's say you create a positioning template. It's like you say that, okay, these are the unique attributes. What value do these unique attributes bring in? And of course, who cares? And hopefully, who cares a lot? That will define everything around how your product should be positioned, how you should price it, what are the different sales techniques you're going to use, who you're going to reach after, go after. Once you know all of these critical aspects, that's when you can see that how you define your products. What are the features that you build so that they can do the work, the job that they want your product to do, right? So that's key here. Like, who cares a lot? And all of these, the framing is potentially the first thing that's necessary before we can get into any road mapping, any product features, and so on and so forth. So framing is important, and this is one of the easy ways to kind of think through how to frame it. All right. One more last call for questions around positioning, framing, anything, any experiences that you want to share? Case 2 and case 3. So in the framing.
Yes, Prashant.
So style 2 and style 3, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so it's between. So as you can see, this is a particular niche, something that let's just say there is a market leader, and your market leader has missed out on a small set of customers that exist, but then they are adding other components to achieve the result that they're looking for, right? So it's a niche. Your market segment is going to be smaller, but you obviously are not taking on head on with the leader, and you only are focusing on a small set of people or small set of customers. Whereas in this case, in case of style 3, you obviously have a breakthrough innovation, right? So you're not targeting a small segment, you're still targeting a bigger segment, but then your fundamentals have improved with your breakthrough technology or innovation, and it's not necessarily technology, but let's say how you sell, to the point where it's now much more economical, and then that's how you're going to undercut your leader in the cost, and then you can completely dethrone the leader, right? So you're not looking at a small segment, that a gap that your market leader has left or overlooked, but you are looking at how to unseat somebody. A quick example is your Zoom versus WebEx, right? So when WebEx, most of you may know is, they were the same founders. How did Zoom come in and dethrone the Cisco solutions or WebEx and others? The way they did it was the ease of not tying into an enterprise market and making it open for web. Underneath, in this case, it was pretty much the same. But then the market that the WebEx of the world initially ignored is a web-based, easy way for somebody to send a Zoom link, for instance. Now we call it Zoom link, but then a link for a video conference, and then that would be enough for somebody to get on, instead of coming in, downloading an app, being in an enterprise setting, validating all your emails, and so on and so forth. So the time to onboard was difficult with corporate solutions, right? But then Zoom came in, and then the first thing, of course, your underlying product has to be good. You cannot be dropping the calls, or video cannot be choppy, and so on and so forth. But then I'm pretty sure the technology wasn't bad necessarily with WebEx or any other solution. It was just that they focused on something that was niche to start with, and then they expanded. They landed, and once it was popular, they expanded on it to dethrone. So it's one of the ways of how you enter a market. Doesn't mean you cannot extend and expand and dethrone, but where you put in your energy when you're in your go-to-market, that's where this comes in.
Just a follow-up question to that, Prashant. But what will be the moat then for people who come with Style 2? Because it's easy for Style 3 to just come in. I mean,
Yeah,
not Style 3, I mean the
style two.
dominant person.
Yeah. So the and the moat is what you the land and expand, right? So once you bring in as many customers with like the niche category, your moat has to be two things. First is that it has to be the speed of execution has to be high enough so that the big guys don't just necessarily just catch up, right? But then you have to execute fast enough such that you're going towards anybody who is not in a corporate setting. Let us say all your startups in this case, who does not have the bandwidth to uh, come up with like a full-blown enterprise solution, but then you are just going and expanding on it, and that's the challenge, of course. But then at least to enter, you're not having a difficulty in entering a market, and all your strategies has to be how you can probably expand or find parallel uh, parallel categories of markets where you can operate on.
Thanks, Prashant.
Nice to see you again, by the way.
Likewise.
All right, anything else? Go to quick road mapping. Cool. So now that
Prashant, there is one more question from Nikhil.
oh, sorry, I missed it. Is it in the chat?
Yeah, it's on chat. What are some popular examples of Style 4?
Style 4. Sorry. Yeah, so you can think of it. I gave an example of iPhone in this case, right? That was the simplest one. Everybody knows. But then it was a way to, again, these are all go-to-market strategies, right? So it wasn't the case that, for example, in the iPhone, there wasn't there were solutions for browsing the internet. There were solutions for corporate communication, for messaging, and so on and so forth. Like we had SMS, we had a way to browse the internet. But then iPhone came in, it merged a couple of existing categories, and it created an entirely new category based on how they created. Of course, that's a solution which had elements of your innovation, your technology breakthrough, everything else. But then one of the main ingredients about this is how you can come up with an entirely new solution. And some of the other examples is all of the payment solutions using crypto, for instance, right? So that's a new category altogether. So how is it that you're able to do cross-border payments or transfer of money without having to go through all the intermediaries? That's entirely new category that you're kind of coming to, where where we are, and as I'm mentioning here, that it is difficult for everybody to say it, right? Not everybody will be directly on board. While the final product or the final service is clear, but then they have to understand, how easy it is or how difficult it is, and it's not easy to convince. So that's the part that's challenging around this. But then of course, when crypto takes over and we have like crypto powering all of the payments, all of the different ways of doing all the financial aspects of solutions that we're looking for, it's the rewards are going to be huge for anybody who can break this. It makes sense, Nikhil?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Sure. All right. With that, let's get to how to build roadmaps. But primarily, I'll skip over kind of the basics of road mapping. I'm pretty sure this group is familiar, but I think I'll rather bring our highlighting our attention into how to kind of think about breaking a company strategy and coming up with a product roadmap. So company strategy is important, right? And the company strategy, one of the elements is how you position it. Once you have the positioning, you have to build through the company strategies, and hence from there will be the roadmaps. So again, strategy is a series of actions to organize a set of activities and to achieve a particular outcome. Now, one of the couple of objectives is around increasing revenue, improving customer satisfaction, customer retention, and so on and so forth. But one important thing to note is before you can think about product strategies, you have to have a company strategy. Without that, it's going to be very difficult to come up with the right product strategy. And then it's like, okay, you don't have the right product. Let's take an example. So for instance, company objective is like increase revenue by increasing user satisfaction. In a couple of elements, it's like simple and concise. It's high level, directional, and you have your goal, which is increasing revenue. And you're also saying, in this case, you could be increasing revenue in multiple ways, right? Like you could just lower the cost, but then you don't want to do that. You're saying, in this objective is by increasing the satisfaction. Now, the first level of things to do is to break down your company objectives into sub-items. Right? And let's take an example of increasing user satisfaction. What are the different ways we could achieve customer satisfaction? We could get the new users. This is like existing users. Both of them have to have a good experience, right? The new users' experiences around onboarding. For existing users, we could think about, can we do more, which is new features? Can we make the existing users happy by not having them go through like the limitations around maybe performance or bugs or issues that we have, etc. And this is kind of breaking it down into 3 to 5 sub-items, you would say. Then comes in, getting deeper into how you could achieve a particular sub-item. So in this case, taking the example, for new users, can we increase the self-onboarding a little bit better, right? So you think about what is the experience Can we take out all of the friction points for them to go and, let's just say, fetch their driver license if you wanted to get more information, or anything around the past history or bank information, for instance. So we have to think about how can we make the onboarding really fast and simple. For existing users, there shouldn't be too many problems. If this product efficiency is like it's not too slow, anything that goes and directly relates to a churn, anything that will relate to a smooth experience. And then, of course, the new features is like, what features do customers really want? And that goes around your prioritization exercise, which we'll talk about next. But primarily around how can you make the customers happier at the end of the day. Now, of course, McKinsey has a framework for this. It doesn't have to be 100% like this, but one of the guidance is mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, right? So you have to make sure that all the subsets, they're not just overlapping, just so that you don't have to think about building one solution that handles everything, and then you leave a lot of different things on the table. And of course, the sum of parts has to be such that it covers everything that you want to solve, right? So this is one of the models that you can think through when you're breaking it down into sub-items, for in this case. The next step pretty much is, once you have broken down into multiple different phases or sub-items, you will have the hypothesis, right? And this is what I alluded to a little bit earlier. It's this is where you become more quantitative in terms of finding out the data points around, let's just say, in case of onboarding, it's like you have the data that they leave without finishing up the onboarding process. New features is they're just not coming back. Your customers are going to different either alternative solutions or adding more solutions to their chain to accomplish a particular outcome in this case, right? And of course, nobody loves a product that has a lot of bugs, or it's just too slow, and so on and so forth. Now, there are multiple ways apart from getting your instrumenting your code and so on and so forth. Is like, that's how you see the NPS scores. That's a very good indicator of like where people are having challenges around experiencing your product right now. And then, mind you, this is the existing user space, right? So for new users, of course, it's kind of how do you streamline your onboarding. Once you have a set of hypotheses, you have all the details that's necessary, you will need to prioritize one over the other. And here, there are multiple frameworks for prioritization. One of the simplest ones is RICE, which fundamentally is around ROI, right? So you know that to improve onboarding, it's going to take X number of manpower or resources, and you let's say that's not 25%, but then that's more than 25% of people who are losing and who are not finishing. But if that's your metric, to add the more number of users first, just so that they can come in, that's where you're going to prioritize your resources on making sure that you build a seamless onboarding experience in this case, right? But then if your results show that the apps crash or it's really buggy, then that's not going to be useful, because you're not going to be able to retain anybody in this case, right? So it has to be quantitative. and it has to be highly data driven, and you have to understand where to apply the same resources such that you can achieve the goals that you're looking for. In this case, increasing user satisfaction. Right. So again, there are multiple different frameworks, but one of the simplest ones is RISE, and it's something that we inherently understand. From there, you can define kind of a product strategy, if you will, right? So product strategy is nothing but a set of initiatives that you would embark on for the next couple of units of your particular timeline. So it could be weeks or months or whatever it is based on your objectives. And in this case, diving deeper into this example, it's like, okay, for onboarding, you can come up with a better experience, create incentives to share positive experience, right? So that's another way to expand your user base. And of course, better user support. So better user support is something you can say around how many people contact your customer service or send an email, chat, whatever it is. These are a synthesis of different things you can do, which will address all of your hypotheses in this case. Now, better experiences is for newer users, but then how can you make sure that you build a, like, let's say a bot for chat for customer service instead of having them to call, or or FAQs that will be there in while onboarding. So all of those things around the product itself will be your high-level product strategy, and this should encompass all of your different sub-items that you had chosen earlier, right? And of course, once that's in place, you kind of think about how can you synthesize a roadmap of it. So again, roadmap is nothing but you kind of broke down from your company objectives, came up with your product strategies, and then you can say that, oh, by the way, these are the different projects that you can do. The projects can map to one-on-one to features, or it could just be enhancement or whatever it is. It could be different things at given a particular scenario, but then it's how you wanted to achieve the product strategies that you've come up in the earlier phases. And the 1, 2, 3, 4, that's nothing but sequencing, right? So you sequence based on your availability of resources, your availability of what's important given a particular timeline, and so on and so forth, such that it could just be that lining up for a corporate event, right? Or it could be an industry sort of a conference that you're leading through, and then you want to make sure that you have good reviews by then. So all of those things will come into play in terms of sequencing. But if you have your product strategy well defined, you wouldn't at least lose track of all the things. So in a nutshell, product strategy is what you want to do, and product roadmap is kind of how do we achieve it. Now, please note that this is not how it's implemented. It's more around how you achieve it and when. That's key. That's a sequencing part. So here's an overall, sort of a view, right, from the company objective, breaking it down, prioritizing, and then coming up with a set of projects and sequencing them. Yeah, so that's kind of a very high level of how you could decompose and build into roadmap.